God is a spirit, and his worshippers must worship him in spirit and in truth. God is a spirit, and his worshippers must worship him in spirit and in truth. I wanna be a true worshipper, true worshipper that worships God in spirit and in truth. I wanna be a true worshipper, true worshipper that worships God in spirit and in truth, spirit and in truth.
Hello and Wagwan family. I am Lisa May. Welcome to Becoming a True Worshipper, where we explore the different perspectives and expressions of worship and share testimonies in order to help others on their journeys to become who God wants them to be. Today we have another powerful testimony, another special guest with us who will be sharing his testimony. He is Jamie Deans, who was born and raised in Fort Pierce, Florida, in the United States of America. He's father to two sons. He was addicted to alcohol, got involved in selling and using drugs, and would eventually spend some time in prison. But an encounter with Jesus Christ saw his life transformed. We are going to hear all about that. We are going to hear about the transformation that took place in his life. But first, we want to welcome to you, my dear brother, Jamie. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for accepting our invitation.
Yes.
All right. So, yes, we heard from the brief profile that he spent some time in prison. But before we get to that, tell us about your early years. Tell us about what your life was like when you were younger.
So when we talk about the drugging, alcoholic prison guy, it really is different from how I got started. How I got started was at the age of 3. My mother got introduced to the Jehovah's Witnesses from my aunt. And that started an adventure that would really shape my life based on a set of guidelines, religious guidelines that would dictate a lot of things in my life that later on I would obviously contradict heavily. As a Jehovah's Witness, they have a very large focus on God, on Jehovah. I think we all acknowledge God as being the supreme being, as Jehovah is the everything. So along with the lack of holidays, the lack of birthdays, the lack of everything that my friends were doing, that seemed like common, I was developing a relationship with the Lord minus Jesus. So they have Jesus in all of their Bible stories, but Jesus is, I like to say, he's a pawn in the chess game, and God is the king, and Jesus is just part of the story, So I spent 15 of my first 18 years with a flawed perception of the overall gospel. The Jehovah's Witness Bible started a different translation by Charles Taze Russell back in the 1860s. I don't want to misquote myself on the actual year, but he started his own interpretation and changed a lot of things, even in John 1:1, where he calls Jesus a God instead of referring to him as God, um, made him very much almost an idol.
Mhm.
Their depiction of him uh, created a disconnect for me
Mhm.
for all practical purposes.
Mhm.
So, growing up in it, my mom had us knocking on doors 3 days a week. We had Tuesday night Bible study, we had Thursday night service, we had Sunday morning service. Had one-on-one Bible studies with an elder or friend, periodically on a different weeknight. So I was constantly engaged. In fact, I really climbed the ladder inside the congregation, where I started with holding the mics or greeting people at the door, and things of that nature, to the point where um, I earned my time on stage. And as a young teenager, I'd say probably 12, maybe I
Mhm.
started around that time. Started getting up on Thursday nights and would get a 5-minute time slot where I would be able to give a Bible talk, and
Mhm.
they would give me a set group of scriptures, and then I would have an opening scripture reading, maybe an interjection in the middle, more scripture reading, and then close out and work that into a 5-minute talk. And it was a good experience. Later on in life, I had a pastor tell me that that type of training was something that, even though we may not agree with it at this stage of our life, at this maturity in our ministry, it was training. And I'd have to agree, because I find it very, I'm very comfortable getting up and speaking in front of large
Mhm.
groups, especially speaking about the Lord now. And then I also had the time with going on knocking on people's doors and waking them
Mhm.
up in the morning, and actually speaking to them, total strangers, about the Lord, like the Watchtower and the Awake. Everybody's heard of them. And
Mhm.
I had a lot of training, but in the midst of it, I had a lot of problems with the fact that I wasn't celebrating Christmas.
Oh.
I had a lot of problems with, I didn't get to celebrate my birthday. They acknowledge Christ's death, the memorial of Christ's death, which everybody calls Easter. Um, and they do wedding anniversaries. And outside of that, there's really no celebrations within the Jehovah's Witnesses. So I had a really big problem with that. And then around fifth grade, I was 10 years old, and my mom was struggling with the educational system. So I had two older sisters and a younger brother. And my one sister was really close to graduating. We're all about 4 years apart. In fact, I think my elder sister had graduated, and my middle sister
Mhm.
was going to a local high school. And we were at a point where the Ku Klux Klan was very relevant over here, and they were marching up and down to the school. And it would get to the point where they would lock the kids in the high school, lock all the doors and stuff. And it just became very uncomfortable. And my mom made a decision to pull us all out of school and teach us at home. And the
Mhm.
homeschooling really, like, so now I'm not celebrating holidays with all of my friends, and I'm not celebrating birthdays with all of my friends, and now I'm not even going to school with them. So it's almost like this religious segregation from social life.
Mhm.
And that became finding and creating social circles only within the Jehovah's Witness circle. And, I'd like to tell you that all the kids were great and all the kids followed the guidelines, but we were all suffering from the same social disconnect. And, we found ways to circumvent it. Started drinking when I was 15,
Mhm.
and definitely would say by the time I was 18, I had a pretty good alcohol addiction. Um, you know, the being taught at home, we weren't allowed to play sports, we weren't allowed to play competitive sports, we weren't allowed to do anything like that. So it was pretty much a very strong regiment of every other day of going to the Kingdom Hall and going and knocking on doors, and it really kind of got me to a point where I started drinking. I was having a problem where I was getting pressured to get baptized. They wanted me to get baptized, dedicate my life. And I understood it more as a loophole than I did a dedication of my life, because I didn't know exactly why I was dedicating my life. I just knew that it was a step that a lot of my peers were taking. So at that age, we're obviously becoming sexually active or sexually curious. So they start pushing the kids to get baptized because they don't want them to get married unless they're marrying somebody who's baptized and dedicated. But you can't have sexual relationships until you get married. So it became this fast tracking of adulthood that came with a lot of responsibility that I couldn't latch on to. And my big problem with the Jehovah's Witnesses was going through that period and not understanding that I was watching a lot of the kids, just a few years older than me, getting baptized, and then maybe getting caught in fornication, or maybe getting kicked out of school for having a drink or drugs or whatever the case may be. You get called into the congregation by the elders, and at that point they grill you, and then all of a sudden they punish you, and they have what they call the
Punishment would you get?
So the punishment is that they want you to learn your lesson, so they disfellowship you, is what the Jehovah's Witnesses do. And through this disfellowshipping process, you get shamed in front of the congregation.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by shamed?
So they take away your baptismal dedication for the most part, which we all know Jesus is not going to take that back from us. He died on the cross for a purpose. And I'm glad I know that now, but I didn't know it then. So here I am, scared to death that I'm already drinking. So I already know I've got an X against me. So if I go let them baptize me, all of a sudden I don't know that I'm going to give up drinking, And I'm watching these other kids get disfellowshipped. And when they disfellowship you, you go through this process of getting grilled by the elders. They make a decision. And then for a period of 6 months to a year, depending on how diligent you are to getting back on the plus side of being a witness and having that removed from you, they take and isolate you to the back of the congregation. And nobody's allowed to talk to you. You're not allowed to interact with the congregation. You come in silently. Your own family can't even talk to you. And you sit in the back of the church and you watch, and then you leave. And by you repeatedly coming humbly and not speaking and not stepping over the guidelines, they eventually will reinstate you. And all of a sudden you're baptized and you're back in God's grace and everything again. And I watched it psychologically ruin a lot of young adults. And I could never, ever, ever do it. I couldn't do it. So I ended up getting to a point where at the end of my being 17, I'd been in not a lot of serious trouble, but I'd gotten caught drinking in a few things. And I basically wanted to go get my feet wet and what all was going on. I wanted to celebrate a birthday and have a Christmas. I just wanted to be like my friends and get out from underneath that stigmatism of the witnesses. And the last day of my 17th birthday, as I was about to turn 18, I went and packed up everything that I owned, and I sat and I waited. And when I woke up the next morning, I put everything I owned in my car and I left, because it was the only way. If I stayed there, my mom was very adamant that I would have to remain a Jehovah's Witness, that I would have to practice, that I would have to really work diligently towards dedicating my life and getting baptized as a Jehovah's Witness. So I showed her. I packed my car and I moved to the end of the street with my friend. I didn't go to Yeah. So when I say I was born and raised in Fort Pierce and never left, I almost didn't even leave the same street for the first couple of years after I left home. And from there, I tell everybody that my mom was holding me tight like a spring. And if you hold a spring really tight, at the point that you have to release that spring, when I woke up and all of a sudden I was 18 and could make my own decisions, she had to let it go. And I took off and I just bounced all over the place out of control.
Mm.
And it was life coming at me 100 miles an hour. And it was all new experiences. Some of them I loved, some of them I hated. I went right out and got my first tattoo. I was 18. I'm a man. I'm going to get a tattoo. But I started.
What did you get a tattoo of?
I had gotten over on my arm. I had gotten an eagle, and it was
Okay.
funny because I walked into the tattoo shop and I had no idea what I wanted, not at all. And the guy goes, "Well, I just drew up this tattoo of an eagle," and I said, "Okay, I'll do it." And he
Mm.
puts it on, and the eagle was flying backwards. It was an atrocity. It was terrible. It's actually a lion now. But I had to cover it up. It was so bad. But along with that, my buddy that I moved in with, his family, they were great. But we started smoking marijuana right away. It was like, well, I gotta try this because all my friends have been doing it. And the next thing you know, I started smoking marijuana. And did I have some regrets in that? Yeah, I wanted to be cool. But I don't know that I necessarily enjoyed it out of the gate, but I didn't stop either. Started smoking cigarettes. Um, would smoke cigarettes for a good part of my life. Would smoke marijuana about 90% of my life. From that point, uh, drinking was wild parties, was a lot of strange opportunities. I would probably 2 months after leaving home, I was 18 years old now, and I lost my virginity. Late bloomer, late bloomer, but that was one of the things with Jehovah's Witnesses. There was no fornicating. So I held on to my virginity till I was after 18. And so I'm experiencing all these new things and some things great, some things horrible. But the alcohol became very prevalent because as I was trying to adjust into all these different realms that I had never touched, I was able to make things disappear with alcohol very easily. So I turned to that a lot.
Explain that a little bit more for us. You're able to make things disappear with alcohol.
So alcohol was always an opportunity for me to circumvent problems. In fact, I'll tell later on in the story when I actually quit. But until the point I quit, I would drink till I blacked out. It would be, some people drink and can have a couple of drinks and get a buzz. Some people just have a drink. I was the person that I wanted to forget about my problems. And by the time I would have forgotten about my problems, they would either amplify at that point because of the alcohol, and I would drink to blackout, or it just became habit forming and I would drink to blackout. So, yeah, I definitely abused alcohol quite a bit. And
so when you blacked out, when you woke up, what was that like? When you got up from this blackout after drinking, what was that like?
realizing that the problem hadn't gone anywhere, and that I would have to suffer through the day, figure out what the new problem of the day would be, and then look forward to the evening starting all over again. Spent the greater part of my life drinking every day. To have not drank would have been, I just absolutely didn't have money. I drank every day of my life, and that played a big part socially, would put me in a lot of different circles. I hung out with a lot of different bands back then, back in, so we would have been the late 80s, early 90s. There wasn't a lot happening at Fort Pierce at all. I mean, you would have to travel to Palm Beach or up to Orlando to find nightlife, social life, anything like that. Outside of that, you were hanging out in parking lots with a cooler full of beer, and that was social life, you know.
How
So,
did you finance that, the drinking? Were you working at the
so I started working when I was 15 years old, and I've
Okay.
kept a job my whole life. Yeah. By the time I was at 17, just before I turned 18, probably about 5 months before I turned 18, I got into the automotive parts business with a local Cadillac dealership. And I took on 40 plus hours if they'd let me. And, you know, I did really good response with that. I will give my mom a lot of credit that, you know, we were very, we weren't rich. We
Mhm.
were a little bit below middle class. And if I wanted to have nice things, I had to work. So I started working early, and I have no regrets on that. You know, I look at kids nowadays in their mid 20s and still have no careers or whatever. And the parts business became a really, really, really big part of life. And man, pretty much up till about 5, 6 years ago, honestly, I was in the parts game. Yeah. Yeah. So, it allowed me to keep money and finance that
Drinking
lifestyle, you
habit?
know. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
drinking heavy. So I ended up going through a couple different relationships, and by the time I was approaching 21, I met a girl, and about 4 months later, we got married in her mom's living room. And that was, she was a witness. She was a Jehovah's
Mm-hmm.
Witness, and I had met her, and we had to get married because we were fornicating, and we thought we were keeping it secret. We went got married so that we didn't violate the rules, and we went off on our honeymoon. We went up to Ohio, and she ends up telling her sister about the wild 3 months that we've had. So as we're driving back from Ohio, her sister's talking to her mom, tells her mom about the wild 3 months we had. And I think we got home like 3 in the morning, 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning from driving overnight from Ohio. Get home, get to bed, and at 6 o'clock in the morning, her mom and stepdad are at the foot of our bed waking us up. And I'm like, what's going on? I'm thinking there's an emergency. Mom's like, I want answers. I talked to your sister. I know you guys were having sex before you got married. And from that day forward, I realized that I hadn't married the girl that I thought I was in love with. I actually married her mom. And that marriage only lasted a year and 4 months. And I was so miserable and depressed about how things had transpired, and how all of a sudden the whole rules of the Jehovah's Witness had now impeded on my life that had no rules. Right. And now complicated to things to the point where me and this girl, we just wanted to be apart. I started drinking really heavy, started drinking whiskey and rum. And in fact, we had a shelf in our kitchen that went all the way around the top of the kitchen. And by the time we had divorced, I had completely filled that shelf with empty bottles. Yeah, half-gallon bottles. And I was drinking that heavy. I got really, really fat. I'm about 245 right now, but I was almost 280 pounds then. And I was miserable. And then trying to transition out of the marriage and into my own life, that's when I started selling drugs pretty heavy. So I got into really just selling marijuana out of the gate, but I got really good at it, like really good at it. And with nothing going on and the parts business showing that it was an income, but I was never going to be rich, rich. I got to a point where I wanted to be, you know, Miami Vice was on TV then. so it's all these glamorous drug dealers driving fancy cars. And I'm like, man, I gotta have a Ferrari. I gotta do, this, that, and the other thing. So I overthought the whole process and started selling marijuana in high quantities. Like I say, I got really good at it. Me and my first wife ended up getting divorced after a year and 4 months. And I get into a lot of different circles. And I remember I'm a service manager now. I'm out of the parts game for a minute. I'm a service manager at a local Goodyear dealership. And this guy comes in, and this guy is going to change my life radically. He comes in and he's got a mud race car. He's got a big jacked up Suburban. He's got a fast boat. He's got all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, this guy's straight off of the set of Miami Vice, man. I want to be like this guy, right? So he ends up inviting me to his shop. And when I get to his shop, we smoke a joint and we're talking and stuff. And he starts asking me questions. Hey, do you know where I can get a pound of marijuana? And I'm like, well, yeah, you got the right guy. And I didn't realize he was feeling me out to see where I was at in that status, where he probably had 50 pounds of marijuana and just wanted to know, was I cool? Was I okay? So he played it backwards, which was very brilliant on his part. And we ended up earning each other's trust. And I would end up selling a lot of marijuana for this guy. And it was coming in by the boatload. And I was in competition with another guy in Port St. Lucie that he and I were definitely on top of the dealer scale. There wasn't too many people that could compete with us. And we did good for a while, really good. And it got to a point where as I start to get towards the prison, it's because this guy that I met at Goodyear, he runs out. His big supply of multitudes of pounds of marijuana just starts to run out. So I started dabbling and selling some cocaine, selling some pills, selling acid and mushrooms, anything that was anybody wanted to fill in the void. But we got to a point where the flow just cut off. It stopped. So I got nervous. I got to a point where, what's going on? Why has it stopped? What do we need to do? And I knew I was at this point, I've spent so much time with this guy. I know that there's some things going on that he's not just got a dealer that he goes and gets it from. And I don't know all the details, but he's let on a few things and let a few things out of the bag. And I end up sitting down with him and I said, listen, I'm grabbing a little bit from over here and a little bit from over there, but I really am losing traction with my customers. My customers are now going over to this other guy, and I don't want to lose any more time. What do we need? What's going on? What can I do to help resolve this? And he said, well, my truck is down, needs an engine or transmission. I don't remember which one, but basically the only way this is going to work is if I can get you to give me a ride down to Fort Lauderdale. And I said, okay, that's simple enough. Well, it wasn't really all that simple. The plan was that we would drive down to Fort Lauderdale and he would have a vehicle at a warehouse and he would grab that vehicle from the warehouse and he would go get the supply and he would bring it back and then I would drive him home, which sounds really simplistic. The reality was that simple plan was just going to get obliterated. And we ended up putting the plan together. I had this was in 93, late 93, and I had just gotten a brand new Nissan pickup. So, the truck is really good shape. There's no reason we can't get down there and get back. And myself and my two soon-to-be co-defendants got in with me. And we're going to meet the fourth guy. who's got
Mhm.
the vehicle at the warehouse and everything. So we load up with a half gallon of Jim Beam and an ounce of
What is
weed.
that? What's
So
Jim?
so Jim Beam is a whiskey, a sour
Okay.
mash whiskey. So we grab some Coca-Cola, some Jim Beam. We've got an ounce of marijuana, and we're rolling joints and making drinks and heading to Fort Lauderdale in my truck. And
So weren't
they've
you
got
afraid stopped by the police?
what's that?
Weren't you afraid of being stopped by the police while you're drinking and
We
driving?
really we really weren't scared of too much of anything.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, I hate to say that, but that's the truth. So we take off down there, and they've got a plan, and all I got to do is get to the warehouse. But we
Mhm.
we go midday, late afternoon, and when we get down there, we decide we're going to go to this bar, and there's pool tables, and we're going to hang out and just wait for everything to fall into place, and then I'd get them over to the warehouse, and things would happen. So when we get to the bar, there's the three of us. We meet the fourth guy, and the main guy that I met at Goodyear and the guy from Fort Lauderdale hang out at the bar. And they're putting all these plans together, and they're making phone calls, and they're just doing whatever they're doing. I'm with the other guy that rode down with us playing pool. We're just drinking, having a good time. And we get to a point after being there for about an hour, and the main guy comes over to me and he says, "Hey, so it looks like we won't be able to get the marijuana until probably midnight tonight. And we
Mhm.
got so much time to kill. There's another guy that's kind of close by, man. I want you to just drive me by and let's see what's happening there. And then we'll come back to the bar." I'm feeling no pain at this point. I've got a good buzz on. So it's like, yeah, no problem. Let's do it. So the three of us load back up in my truck and we drive around not far. I don't remember how far, but not far at all from the bar. And I noticed that the fourth guy from Fort Lauderdale, he gets in his car and leaves. And I'm like, I thought we were coming back to well, whatever. So we get in my truck and we drive around there. And he tells me, pull over here on the side of the road. So I pull over, and he's like, yeah, so this is it. This is a good time. And I said, this is a good time for what? He goes, we're going to do this. And I said, yeah, that wasn't the plan. And he said, we're going to do this, and you're going to wait right here. You got nothing to worry about. And I said, man, I was really supposed to go sit and wait at the warehouse. And he goes, listen, don't let me beat you up.
Mhm.
And so I took the threat serious, and I made the decision to sit there while they went and did what they did. So now everything starts becoming really serious and real. Um, they've brought a duffel bag,
Mhm.
which I assume has got guns in it. I assume it's got whatever. And they pull it out and they stick it on the front seat. And the next thing I know, they're putting on police jackets. They're pulling out warrants that aren't real warrants for that address, but they look legit. Um, they're pulling out all kinds of stuff out of this bag. But they end up pulling guns out, and the guns are pellet guns from, at the time, Kmart. Kmart was popular. But they thought
Mhm.
if they used pellet guns, that they wouldn't get, if they got caught, they wouldn't get in trouble with having firearms. That is not the case. And I'll tell you about that later. So now they're going in to rob drug dealers with pellet guns.
Mhm.
So let's just turn up the risk quite a bit. And what's told to me is that I'm going to sit there. They're going to go up and they're going to rob the house. And when they come out and wave, I'm supposed to pull up real fast. They're going to jump in the truck and we're going to take off.
Mhm.
So I'm scared to death. I'm not going to lie. I'd love to play tough guy and say, yeah, we're the biggest bad guy. I was scared to death. And so they take off on foot. And it was the longest 3 to 5 minutes of my life. It just seemed like it took forever. All of a sudden, and my eyes never broke looking down the road to where they were at. All of a sudden, the big guy comes out. He waves his hand. I take off down the street and I stop in the middle of the road, and he jumps in and he pulls the key out of the ignition. And he says, I need you to come inside. And I said, man, that was not part of the deal. He goes, there's no deal whatsoever. He goes, you're coming inside. So I fight it. I don't want no part of going in the house. It just never was on the radar for me. I know that turns up the risk and the liability quite a bit for myself. And the threats are not now that he's going to beat me up. The threats are that he's going to go home and start murdering my family members if I decide that I don't want to go inside because I already know too much, et cetera, et cetera. So it got to the point in a very long minute that I made the decision that I had to go inside. There was too many people. They were outnumbered. There was only 2 of them, and there was 7 people, I think, inside. So, and they're not finding what they're looking for. I believe we're there for marijuana. Turns out they're trying to find a kilo of cocaine is what they're looking for now. So now my truck is stranded in the middle of the road. He's got the ignition key, and I take off and I follow him inside. So now I'm standing over 7 people who are duct taped, watching them, telling them not to move. Don't have a gun. I'm just all muscle telling these guys, don't move. They're taped, but if 3 of them wanted to get up and give me a hard time, I might have been in trouble for all practical purposes. So they ransacked the house, and as they're ransacking the house, a vehicle pulls up, and I'm like, hey, there's a car out front. And the big guy comes out, and he comes out at gunpoint to him, and he guides him in the house. And it turns out it's the owner of the house. And while we were at the bar, we've got the 2 guys, the big guy and the guy from Fort Lauderdale, sitting at the bar. And there's a girl sitting about 4 bar stools away. And she's in the car with the guy that owns the house. So it turns out as we pulled up, he was on his way to the bar to pick up the girl and comes in right behind us with the girl. So we get them inside, tie them up, put them on the ground, and they finally find the cocaine. They find the cocaine, they find some cash, and we take off. We get in the vehicle. Now I'm in the back. Those 2 guys are in the front, and we're taking off to a rendezvous spot that the 2 guys had put together at the bar. So by the time we get there, we're not there 30 seconds, and all of a sudden there's gunfire. People are shooting at us. And the guy from Fort Lauderdale, his car gets shot a couple of times. None of us get hit by bullets. So as I tell my stories going on, I will tell you that I did not have a relationship with God. I did not have a relationship with Jesus, but I feel emphatically at this point in the stage of my life that God had his hand of protection on me. I'm very convinced of that because we should have been shot. It turns out that the girl, while she was sitting at the bar, she heard the whole plan. When they came home, they already knew what was going on, and they knew where we were rendezvousing at. So they were going to let everything happen without anybody getting hurt, because at that point they knew that, that there was a possibility somebody could get shot or hurt, and they were going to wait until they had the upper hand, and they did. And they followed us over to the rendezvous point was the Cheetah 3, which is a men's club in Fort Lauderdale. And there was a big shootout in the parking lot, and we got out of there and nobody got shot. And the sad part of the story is that the 2 guys that I was with were cocaine addicts. So we ended up going to a hotel, and they're doing some of the cocaine. And then the guy that got shot at, he comes over and he gets some of the cocaine to go sell so he can make some money on the deal. And we're left with the rest of it so we can sell some and make some money. And as we're at the hotel room getting ready to take off the next day, we find out that the guy that we robbed called the cops, told the cops that we robbed a couple ounces of cocaine from him. Made a police report on the couple ounces of cocaine. True story.
Are you serious?
No, I'm serious. But he also did police sketches. And now they've got sketches of the three of us. And they're good, man. They're all over the TV. And we're like, that's us. Yeah, that's us for sure. There's no doubt that's us. He described us pretty good. I don't know how those sketch artists do their job and do such a great job. But it was almost as though we sat there and let them sketch our pictures. So now they've got our pictures. We're all over the news, and we're stuck in Fort Lauderdale.
Wait. I heard that, JB, somebody calls the police to have them arrest you for
stealing their cocaine.
And the police actually pursues you.
Yeah. So
is that law in Florida or something?
I don't know how the law plays out. I will tell you that in court, we were given $2,000 or $2,800, I think was the number, $2,800 restitution to compensate that man for his cocaine loss. True story. True story. So we end up leaving the hotel room knowing that we're being looked at, and we got to go hide out for a couple days. So they have another friend, and we go to his house, and we park my truck in his garage and close the garage. And we stay there for the better part of almost 3 days. And in 3 days, these guys end up smoking just about all the cocaine. And I woke up on the third day. It was the second day because the first day we did the hotel. But what would have been the third day, I woke up and I said, "Listen, you guys have been up for 3 days." I said, "We need to take what we've got left and we need to go sell it, get home, and just forget this ever happened." And they're like, "There's nothing left. We got to go." And I'm like, "You are gotta be kidding me." So now we've done all this and there's no reward whatsoever. These guys got high for 3 days and there is no reward. There's no money. We're like looking for change to get gas to get home. And so we go home and I decide, man, this is it. I'm done with these guys. I don't want nothing to do with them. I'm actually not working at the time. I'm relying on drug dealing to sustain me. And all of a sudden I come back home. Now I'm in trouble. I got the cops looking for me for stealing somebody's cocaine. And I don't have any supply now for all my people. And my people are very quickly going elsewhere to get their supply. And now my job as a drug dealer is going south. It's tanking fast. So about a week goes by and the big guy says, "Listen, we got to lay low, but we got to do something because my truck's down. My old lady's just totally upset with me because we didn't make any money. And, I stayed getting high for 3 days. So he comes up with a brilliant idea that we're going to go do it again, but we're going to go up to Deltona, Florida, which is north of Orlando. And I don't have a lot of choices. So are you sure we're going to be able to go up and find some marijuana? Yeah. I've got 3 different places that we can go up there. We're going to come back full of marijuana. Okay, I'm in. So we end up going up there, and the first night, the big guy sets up a big purchase of 20 pounds of marijuana with one of his old contacts. And he can't go be any part of the robbery. So it's got to be me and the other guy in the truck that's been with us this whole time, his partner. And he sets it all up and he goes over every last detail. And now instead of driving the vehicle and or just going and watching over people, I'm number 2 guy in the actual act of robbing this drug dealer with a pellet gun still, because we still don't know that we ain't supposed to, that it doesn't make a difference. So this one gets really intense. And we end up going to this guy's house. And I remember it. He dropped us off by a church, which was a couple blocks away. And we walked on foot dressed as cops. Thank God a patrolman didn't go by and see us. But we're dressed as, we got police jackets and everything on. And we walk up to this guy's front door and we knock. And the guy, you can hear him get out of his like lazy boy chair and start coming down the hallway. About halfway down the hallway, he says, "Who is it?" And we're supposed to yell police.
Mhm.
And the other guy yells the big guy's name as though it's him. Halfway through it, he realizes he messed up and he goes, "Police." So he says part of the guy's name and then, police. And the next thing you hear in that guy's hallway, I'm telling you, I've heard this sound in my dreams, my nightmares 100 times, was a 12 gauge shotgun chambering a bullet. And I'm like, somebody's got a real gun now.
Mhm.
And he's standing on the other side of this door.
Mhm.
So as soon as we hear him chamber a shell in that shotgun, we both take off. I go to the right. The other guy goes to the left. The guy that goes to the left, he gets straight out the driveway and he's gone and he's heading back over towards the church. I go to the right and I'm going to go behind the house and I'm going to try and disappear somewhere. Well, he's got a 6-foot wooden privacy fence covered in vines, only recessed back maybe 3 foot from the front corner of the house.
Mhm.
So I go running around, and as soon as I hit it, I realize I'm done. I can't get over this. There's dogs on the other side of the fence, and I'm freaking out now. I mean, severely freaking out. So across the yard, there's probably a 10-foot hedge, 10-foot tall hedge, and there's a van parked on the other side of it. So I've got to get across this guy's yard, through the hedge, around the van, and back out to the street to be able to get off to safety.
Mhm.
And I peek around the corner of the house, and the guy's standing out there looking around, looking for any sign of us. And he's just, first thing that moves, he's going to shoot it. There's no doubt about it. The other guy, he's gone. He took off. He's clear. So I wait and just keep peeking, and I finally see him turn his back to me and is looking the other way.
Mhm.
If he doesn't find anything over there, he's going to come to where I'm at next.
Mhm.
And I've either got to go hand-to-hand combat with this guy, or I got to throw my pellet gun at him. And neither one is a really good option because the guy was big. He was really big. So at the point that he turns his back, he starts turning into the carport as though looking to see if somebody's in the carport.
Mhm.
That's by chance. When I tell you God had his hand of protection on me,
Mhm.
I can verify it right now. I took off, and I'm not a fast runner, but I was as fast a runner as I was ever going to be that night. And I took off, and as I jumped to slide through the hedge, because it had voids in the bottom of it, I had to get through where I knew it was safe to get through. As I jumped through, he pulled the trigger on the 12 gauge shotgun and shot right above my head. As I was diving, the buckshot or whatever, of the 12 gauge went through the bushes. I remember hearing it come through the bushes and hit the van.
Mhm.
So I hit the ground. As he's trying to chamber another shell, I'm on the ground climbing army style underneath the van. And the van was my protection the whole time. I got out on the other side and got to my feet and was able to run off to safety. He didn't pursue me on foot. He must have, at that point, knew that he had just dislodged his gun His house is full of drugs. There's nobody around. We just took off. So he had to have gone back inside and left us be. So we get back to the church and we just replay how ignorant the whole thing was and the fact that we blew it. And we left that scene. We left that scene. Now, I told you there was a couple of different opportunities. So the next one we leave, and now all three of us are involved, and we're outside of a house outside of town, and we're like down in the woods and the bushes in a ditch getting tore up by mosquitoes. Doing surveillance, trying to figure out what's going on. And it turns out this guy is having a big party, huge party. So they don't want to go in while there's a party. So we're like, all right, well, we'll go back in the morning. And we come up with this big plan. And we go back to the friend's house that we're staying with. And I'm just exhausted. I'm freaked out. And I'm like, I'm going to go to sleep. So I lay down on this guy's couch and I go to sleep. When I wake up the next morning, the two guys are gone. So I go to the guy that owns the house and I said, hey, what happened? Where are they at? And he said, oh, man, let me tell you. I said, oh, no. He said, they ended up going back to that party, waited till everybody got good and drunk and drugged up, and they went back to the party and they went in as the cops. And they ended up getting a little bit of cocaine. And I was like, oh, no. He said, man, they got some guns and stuff. He goes, but they ended up smoking the cocaine and they took off with these guns. And now they're over on the other side of town trying to trade the guns for more cocaine. And I'm like, here it is. I'm revisiting. Everything's just messed up really bad. And I'm getting the same uneasy feeling. So that guy that we were staying with had called and set up, asked questions about drugs, this, that, and the other thing. So they had a little bit of an idea before they went to the house while I was sleeping. So I'm like, you know what? Enough of this. I'm leaving. And as I go out of the house, somebody pulls up behind my truck, and it turns out it's the guy that was robbed at the party. He puts two and two together. This guy called him and they showed up. And he comes to address him. And there I am trying to get out of there. So the guy gets out and he doesn't know me from Adam. And I tell him, move your car. I'm leaving. And he goes, you ain't going nowhere. And I guess they used my truck. And he saw the truck. So he's got an ice pick and he ends up stabbing one of my tires. And it was a show truck, so I had low profile tires on it, and there's not a lot of air to lose. So he ends up stabbing, and as he stabs it, I just go after him. And he doesn't want to fight and runs and gets in his car, and he leaves at that point thinking that he disabled me. So I run inside to the guy that has the house, and I said, listen, I need to get something in that tire. He goes, I got a plug kit in my truck. So he goes and gets the plug kit. We get a plug in it, and the tire is pretty much flat, but it's not flat. I got enough air in it. I can drive it to the store. So I drive it to the store, and this time literally digging for change to put air in the tire to get gas to get home. And I'm just, my adrenaline's 100 miles an hour. I end up getting air in the tire to the point where it was safe enough to travel. And I jump on I-95, and now I'm doing 70 miles an hour on a tire that's been compromised, severely compromised. And I drive home, and I'm going to leave them there. I'm done with them. I could care less if they get home, if anything, whatever. So they end up getting back there, and then things get really bad, and they just want to get out of there. So a few hours later, after I'm home, he starts calling, and I won't answer his call. He's stranded as far as I'm concerned. So he calls my brother, and he ends up with all these threats again. And, he's going to kill the family, and somebody better come get him, and blah, blah, blah. So my brother calls me and asks me what's going on, and I had to fess up a little bit to him. And my brother said, well, we're going to go get him and just get rid of all these threats and everything. He said, but you got to be done with it. You know, you got to make me that promise. And I was like, man, I don't even want to go get him. He's like, Jamie, he said
Mhm.
some pretty serious things that, you know, I'm going to take serious, and I just want to go get him and be done with this.
Mhm.
So we drove back to Deltona, picked him up in my brother's car, and drove home in complete silence. Most awkward ride I've ever taken in my life, because I was to the point now where I wanted to get violent. I
Mhm.
was angry enough that, you know, his threats against me were now starting to become fruition in my head as reality against him. And we got him home and we dropped him off, and I was done with him. I
Mhm.
literally gave him the silent treatment. It had nothing to do with him. So almost a year goes by.
Mhm.
In that year, he tried to get a hold of me, and at one point, he needed a tire, and I was working at a tire place. So I'd answered the phone. I didn't recognize the phone number,
Mhm.
and he's like, "I need a tire," and I'm like, "Well, it's your lucky day. I need a ride. You know, if
Mhm.
you could pick me up at the house and get me back to work, or get me to work that day, I'll help you out." So he
Mhm.
comes and picks me up, and on the ride from my house to my work, there's a guy that I was getting drugs from, and I mentioned that I was getting drugs from him, you know, as we were going by the house. And he ends up going that night and robbing the guy.
Oh.
And all of a sudden, that ends up resulting in me becoming an accessory, because I gave him information that that guy sold drugs, and then he went and bought it. So he felt bad. And the next day, he came and he gave me a thermos full of marijuana.
Mhm.
And I took it. I shouldn't have, but by me taking it, it made me an accessory to the crime.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I'm almost clear for a year, but I'm thinking at this point that we've already beat the cocaine guy down south. Nobody knows about Deltona whatsoever. I was at a total loss with all of it, and I was just happy that it was over with. Well, then I start getting phone calls. Hey, man, we think your buddy's gotten arrested. And I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, well, that's his problem, you know, no big deal. And
Mhm.
I'm at work one day and I'm changing a motor mount on a car, and I'm up underneath the car. And all of a sudden, 6, 8 vehicles pull up, and there's shiny black shoes all around me. And guys screaming, come out from underneath the car with your hands up, come out with your hands up.
Mhm.
And our case became so big and so crazy that it wasn't the sheriff that came and got me. It was the ATF and the FDLE that came and arrested me.
Does that mean ATM?
So the ATF is your alcohol, tobacco, and firearms.
Mhm.
It's a pretty big federal division of law enforcement,
Mhm.
and FDLE is the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. So it's
Mhm.
like the head of all law enforcement. So
Wow.
it was the two very major law enforcement groups that came to pick me up,
Mhm.
and that kind of shook me to the core, because all of a sudden I'm thinking we've got federal charges, federal cases. And the reason they got involved is there was a total of 7 co-defendants in the case altogether.
Mhm.
And 2 of the co-defendants, the reason they had so much police gear and so many warrants and everything else, was 2 of the masterminds of the whole thing were 2 homicide lieutenants of the Fort Pierce Police Department.
Mhm.
So now we got 2 cops involved. There was so much going on with everything, because the incidents I tell you about were just a handful of incidents amongst a lot of law breaking that they had done with these police officers, with the guy from Lauderdale, with the guy
Mhm.
from up north. So now there's 7 co-defendants, and when I get arrested, I get taken to the local FDLE office, and they grilled me for about 6, almost 7 hours,
Mhm.
and asked me every question. At that point, I felt pretty justified in telling them my version of the story. Was it all true? No. Did I give them a lot of the truth? Yes. I wanted to be pretty clear. It turns out that the big guy was arrested. He was smoking crack in a stolen truck, and they ran the tag, they pulled him over, they arrested him, and while he was in that state of being high from the crack, he was very paranoid, so he decided to spill his guts and starts telling him everything. So since he gave a distorted version of the reality, I sat there for 6 hours and I gave him a good portion of my story. At that point, they introduced me to my charges, and I had 11 felonies.
Wow.
So because of the principal rule, which came in 1994, the principal rule says that the accessory rule used to be that if you were involved in a crime, like if I just stuck to the story that I was just the wheelman, you get a slap on the hand and you get probation and you get charged for a couple charges. The principal rule kicked in. The principal rule said that if you were involved in a robbery, had they murdered somebody and I had just drove them there, I would have carried a murder charge. But the fact that everything that they did, that they admitted to, that they had charges for, I received those same charges, even for my small bit of play. So the 11 felonies had 5 felonies that carried life sentences. So I had 5 life sentences I was facing. Yeah. And, it basically, the way they were spelling it out to me was over 100 years worth of prison time is what I was facing. I was up against with the 11 felonies I had. Yeah. So that was pretty sobering, and it was a good reason to sit there for 6 hours and tell my side of the story. They handcuffed my hands, zip tied my ankles, and then put a zip tie between the handcuffs and my ankles. So I was very close in proximity, my hands to my feet. So it was impossible to run, and almost hog-tied for all practical purposes, and put me in the back seat of a police car. And we literally escorted front and back, did 100 miles an hour down to Pompano. They dropped me off at Pompano. From Pompano, I went to Broward County Main Jail. And when I got to Broward, I'm like, I'm going to see the magistrate in the morning. I'm going to find out what my bail is. I'm going to hope that my family can bond me out. And then I just need to go see a lawyer, and I need to get all this behind me. And when I went to magistrate, it turns out that the 5 charges that carried the life sentences prevented me from receiving a bond whatsoever. So there was no bail.
The word of God tells us that there is no one that is righteous. We all have sinned and fallen short of God's standard. Sin has serious consequences. Romans 6 verses 23 says that the wages of sin is death. The penalty or punishment for sin is a spiritual death that separates us from God and condemns us to an eternity in hell. But John 3 verse 16 says, "For God so loved the world, for God so loved you and I, that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life." Jesus paid the penalty for our sins. He paid for our salvation with his blood. Salvation is a free gift from God. It is not something you can buy or work for. But no matter who you are, no matter what you have done, you are not beyond the reach of God's unconditional love and forgiveness. Today, God wants to set you free and give you a new life. Romans 10 verse 9 says, "If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved." So I invite you to say this prayer in faith so that you can be saved. Repeat after me. Heavenly Father, I admit that I am a sinner in need of a Savior. I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God I believe that Jesus died for my sins, was buried, and rose again. I open my heart to you, Jesus. Come into my heart. Forgive me of my sins and save my soul. I receive you into my life. Thank you for saving my soul. In Jesus' name, amen. If you just said that prayer, congratulations and welcome to the family of God. What a powerful, powerful testimony we have been hearing from Jamie Deans. I hope you will join us in our next episode for the conclusion of our conversation. Before you go, though, I would like to leave you with this song I recorded a few years ago. It's called My Desire. So until next time, be blessed.
It's my desire to live for Jesus. It's my desire I wanna live for God is a spirit, and his worshippers must worship him in spirit and in truth. God is a spirit, and his worshippers must worship him in spirit and in truth. I wanna be a true worshipper, true worshipper that worships God in spirit and in truth. I wanna be a true worshipper, true worshiper